Good morning, everybody. Wow, there's a lot of people here. That's awesome. So welcome to the University of Montana, and this is our 18th annual symposium. And we haven't had one in person in a couple of years because of obvious reasons, but here we are, back in action again. So it's really great to see everybody. It's going to be kind of fast and furious today. We have 18 presentations, I think like 67 posters, give or take, that are being judged as we speak next door. And just to kick things off as far as an official welcome to the University of Montana, our president was scheduled to be here this morning, President Seth Bodner. He couldn't make it. He had to go to a Board of Regents meeting. So he did send along his official welcome. So let me play that for you.
My name's Seth Bodner, and it is my privilege to serve as the president of this great institution. Together with my colleagues in UM's REACH program, or Research Education on Air and Cardiovascular Health, which is housed in the School of Public and Community Health Sciences, I want to thank each of you for your work on air quality research projects. We're so proud of the work that you're accomplished. We're grateful for your commitment, and we're honored to host you at UM for this event. Thank you, and have a great visit here at UM.
Oh, great.
All right, thank you, President Bodner, wherever you are. So again, welcome. My name is Tony Ward. I'm a professor here at the University of Montana in the School of Public and Community Health Sciences. So it's our public health program here at UM. And like I said, we are super thrilled to see people in person again. And just a couple of announcements before we get started. So if you have a poster and you need to hang it up, please see Anna at this point. So this is Anna Kiley right here. Everybody say welcome or hello, Anna. All right. So you kind of got a feel for how this is going to go today. So that's Anna Kiley. She's going to be kind of our go-to person. And Mr. Dave Jones is right there. So Dave is a former teacher for a long time at Big Sky High School, and recently retired and now came to work for us here at the University of Montana. So, hello, Dave.
Hello. Hi, Dave.
Okay. So we also are recording this event. So MCAT is here. So Mr. Ron Scholl is in the back. Hello, Ron. So if you always be smiling, because you just never know when somebody's going to snap a picture of you, and or you'll be on camera. So just always be smiling. And this presentation is being recorded for today. And later on, MCAT will be showing it on their station. That you can also download it so you can watch it later on once it's available. But this is part of a media assistance grant. This has been donated by MCAT, so they're donating their time and their efforts and their equipment to record this symposium, and we'll host it later on their website for download. And I think it's channel 189, apparently. So please look out for that, because you're going to be all TV stars at some point. All right, so here is the agenda for today. We started at 9:30ish. At 9:45 to 11, we're going to kind of crank through about 10 presentations. And try to get those as we can, try to finish up by 11. And then we're going to go outside to into the breezeway next door, into the Skaggs building. And that's where all the posters are. So close to 70 posters. So we're going to take a break. Hopefully you guys can go in there and check out the posters and you know, ask questions to presenters, because whoever is presenting in here, there's also presenters for the posters too. So we want to like give them acknowledgement for the great work that they've done too. At 11:30, we'll come back in here. We'll finish up with about 8 presentations or so. And then 12:30 to 1:20 is lunch. And we have Jimmy John's today for you guys. And so you can grab your lunch, go outside, peruse around the health fair that's going on at the same time. Luckily, we got very lucky with the weather today. It's not raining or cold or windy like it has been, so it's like a perfect day out there. So it'll be a nice time just to go outside, hang out, check the different health fair booths out, eat lunch, And then we're going to come back in here and we're going to give away cold hard cash for the presentations and the poster, top 3 posters. So a little bit about the posters. So who in here has a poster? So raise your hand. All right. So the judges, there's a whole bunch of judges that are looking at posters right now. And poster judging starts at 9:45, at 11 o'clock. Once we break for lunch, or break for that 11 to 11:30 break, poster people will go stand by their posters. So then everybody else will go in there and ask you questions about your posters. And then at 11:30, we're going to call out some names. And those folks that are called will go back into the poster session and we'll go through round 2 of judging. So we have our judges that are going to interview you. Everybody else will come back in here. Like I said, there's cold hard cash involved, so it's high stakes. So the first prize will get $100, second prize $75, and third prize will be $50. As far as presentations, we have 18 of them. They will be fast and furious. I'm going to randomly call up names or load up presentations, and when you see your presentation loaded up, I want you to try to get down here as quickly as you can. And I'll have it ready for you when you come down here, but just, as quickly as you can, come down here. You have 5 minutes to give your presentation, and then we have 1 or 2 minutes for questions and answers. And, the best part is when we get questions from the audience, and it's not just our judging panel of these 4 fine women and men up here that will be asking the questions of the posters or the presentations. It'll be a lot more fun if you guys start asking questions, so we welcome questions. And then after that, we'll dim the lights during the presentations. Right at when it's due or when it's over, I'll turn the lights back on. So that's your cue to wrap it up really fast. Because if you run long, then everybody else is kind of behind schedule. So we're going to kind of be pretty rigid on time limits today. Again, top 3 presentations get awards. First prize is $150. Second prize is $125. Third prize is $100. So who in here is involved with the presentation? Okay, no pressure. So actually, we've had one kid several years back. He did his presentation by himself. He had his own solo project, and he won back-to-back. He won as a junior. He came back as a senior and won again. Didn't have any partners, so he pocketed $300 just for himself for this. So if you have a big group, you gotta kind of have to share it. Up to you what you want to do with it. But so that's kind of the ground rules. Now I mentioned that we have 4 judges for the presentations. So I'm going to call them out. And first up is Sarah Cofield. So Sarah works with the Missoula City County Health Department. Hello, Sarah. So you may have seen Sarah. She's world famous for forest fire smoke and communicating what to do during a forest fire event. So look for Sarah. She got literally a world famous blog that she puts out, and also is on the news all the time talking about forest fire smoke impacts during the summer. So next up is Mary French. Hello, Mary. So this is Mary's 17th symposium. So she has been with us for a very, very long time. And so she's an expert. She knows what questions that really stump the presenters. So you got to watch out for Mary because she's going to ask some really tough questions. Usually back in the day, we've had students bring cookies to butter up the judges, but I don't see any cookies. So this year, it works sometimes. But this year, we have Mary without cookies. Mary's awesome. She works for the Center for Environmental Sciences. She's a professional researcher. She studies the impacts on different types of exposure to air pollutants and silica and asbestos on human health and animal health. So we're very lucky to have Mary with us today. Next up is Dr. Lou Hu. Hello, Lou. So Lou is a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Lou is an atmospheric scientist, and he studies air pollution, and He's done some really amazing stuff with forest fire smoke also. He flies around in airplanes through smoke plumes, collects measurements of looking at the chemistry of smoke, and then models that to see how it impacts the health of populations downwind. So thank you, Lou, for joining us this year. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Ethan Walker. Hello, Ethan. So Ethan is an assistant professor in the School of Public and Community Health Sciences. He is an epidemiologist. And Ethan has done a lot of amazing work looking at the impact of smoke on the health of people, whether it's respiratory disease or cardiovascular health. So Ethan is another professional researcher, and he is a biostatistician or statistician also. So really smart guy, and I'm sure he'll have really good questions too. So thank you, judges, for coming today. And you guys are going to be busy over the next couple hours, so thanks again. Okay, so it's go time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up a presentation. I'd also like to mention real fast who's here today. Whoa. So we have over 200 students, 220 students that are here today. When I call out your school, I want you to acknowledge yourselves. So is Anaconda here? All right. I think we could do better than that. So is Anaconda here? All right, moving right along. Is Big Sky here? Is Capital here? That was very unenthusiastic from Capital. Let's try that again. Is Capital High School here? That's a little bit better. Okay. Columbia Falls. Nice. Is Libby here? Very nice. Powell County, Deer Life. That's my man right there. All right. Ronan. Is Ronan here? All right. Back there. Salish Kootenai College. All right. Thank you for joining us. And Valley Christian. Okay. Kind of an unenthusiastic from the back of the room. But we see you. In the back, all right, and Superior. Superior here? Yeah. Okay. So now that we've done that, now we can start with the formal part of the program. Okay, so go ahead and come on down, Capital.
Hello, my name is Felicity Heinzel. I attend Capitol High School, and I'm currently taking Biology 1 Honors, taught by Mrs. Sarah Urban. My project is on vaping and the effects of it, specifically secondhand vaping. So, vaping as a whole is relatively understudied, but we do know that it does have serious health effects. Secondhand smoke is far more studied, and we know that it causes roughly 41,000 deaths yearly, and contains dangerous levels of PM 2.5. We don't necessarily know everything about vaping yet, so that is why I decided to do that in my project. We don't know all the health effects. We've linked different illnesses and diseases to vaping. And we know that it does contain dangerous levels of PM 2.5. So that begs the question, how long are unhealthy amounts of PM 2.5 as defined by the EPA, which is more than 150 micrograms per meter cubed present in the air after using an e-cigarette, and how far from the e-cigarette do these unhealthy amounts of PM 2.5 travel through the air? It would make sense that if the distance increases, then the number of PM 2.5 particles will decrease as they disperse through the air. And as time goes on, the particles will settle, leaving the levels of PM 2.5 to lower. So to conduct the experiment, I needed a measuring tape to measure the different distances, the wind air quality meter, a smartphone to connect to the meter, and an e-cigarette. So the independent variable was time, and the dependent variable was PM 2.5 levels. The control group was the control group was the air quality over 3 minutes without the usage of an e-cigarette. That baseline turned out to be around we used the average of 12 micrograms per meter cubed as the baseline and the control group. So we recorded that and we had a person from different distances, 5, 0, 10, and 15 feet away from the air quality tracker, use a e-cigarette for inhaling for 5 seconds before fully exhaling, straight ahead facing the wind tracker. After this, we recorded the levels of PM 2.5 over the 3 minutes. We repeated this 3 times for each distance. Our results showed that the levels of PM 2.5 spiked, maxing out the air quality reader, leveling, going to 500 for all trials except for 15 feet away. Where on the 15 feet away trials, the maximum was less than 80, which is still not yet in the unhealthy range. So on our averages, you can see that for 5 feet away, one trial seemed to go up and down very quickly, which shows how fast these levels spike and go down, how quickly they disperse in the air. So on average, it took 129 seconds to return to the baseline of 12 micrograms per meter cubed. The wind meter could not read the true level for some of these because it exceeded 500 micrograms per meter cubed. And for all trials except for 15 feet away, hazardous levels of PM 2.5, which is more than 300 micrograms per meter cubed, were recorded. The air quality remained good from 15 feet away on average. So our conclusions said that the increased levels of PM 2.5 will be present in the air for roughly 129 seconds, and that staying 15 feet away from an e-cigarette when being used will prevent a person from inhaling harmful PM 2.5 levels. Of course, the errors in our experiment were possibly the limited space that we had. Ideally, we could have had more space to work with, different distances to measure, and also the limits of the wind air quality tracker, not being able to read more than 500 micrograms. Additionally, any movement in the room would cause disturbances in the air and possibly interfere with the trials. Additionally, human inconsistency, such as breathing in for slightly too long or breathing in for too hard with using the e-cigarette, would also cause different levels in the room. So if I were to continue this experiment, I believe that the next steps would be to measure how multiple puffs of an e-cigarette would affect air quality. For this experiment, we only would use one puff, airing out in between trials, and observe how movement of the air impacts the PM 2.5 levels. And we would measure the levels of PM 2.5 in a more open space as opposed to a closed-off room. And additionally find solutions to counter these high levels of PM 2.5, such as using such a different forms of ventilation, or finding better safe distances. These are the sources that I used. Thank you.
We've got time for one question. In the back.
So how exactly did you measure, like, who breathed in all the e-cigarettes? Did you, like, have somebody that could do that, or?
Yes, I have a brother who agreed to participate in the experiment, so I just used him.
Okay, Big Sky, come on down. So Capital set the bar pretty high.
Hi, my name is Namal Malaccio.
I'm Becca.
And for our project, we did the contribution of humidity to PM 2.5 levels to shower or not to shower. So we used to shower. So, yeah. So the question that we posed for our experiment was, what effect does humidity have on PM 2.5 levels in an enclosed space? So the space that we chose was a bathroom. And so for humidity, we chose to take a shower to increase humidity levels.
Some of the background things that we study was how particulate matter 2.5 affects humidity and the health effects of that.
So just a little bit of background on PM 2.5. So PM 2.5 is particulate matter that is 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller. This can be like organic compounds, metals, and these are very, very tiny, and so they can get into your lungs and have very bad health effects.
So humidity is obviously like the amount of water vapor in the air, and it has a lot of negative effects on air pollutants such as PM 2.5, as well as it increases the spread of toxic chemicals, viruses in the air, and things like dust mites and mold. And there's also some negative effects to low of humidity as well. It can increase respiratory infections, and if you have allergies, it can kind of be bad on both sides of the spectrum if it's like too low or too high. So it's important to have like kind of a balance in between.
So the health effects of PM 2.5, so this is a very, very small particle, and so the danger of this is that it can get very deep into your lungs, into like your alveoli, and get into your bloodstream and cause many diseases and adverse health effects. One way that we measure PM 2.5 levels in the air is micrograms per cubic meter, and a good thing to keep in mind is we want to have PM 2.5 levels below 35 micrograms per cubic meter. If it gets above this, this can cause bad health effects for sensitive groups, and as you get even higher for people who are not in these sensitive groups, just regular people like us.
So some of the health effects of low humidity is it increases like your allergic reactions. If you have allergies, it can cause like dry skin and dehydration. The effects of high humidity it causes like a lot of various health problems. It can increase, if you have like asthma or any other respiratory diseases or illnesses, it can increase your symptoms that you have that relate to that. It can also cause your body to overheat, and it can be bad because of the things in the air that affect your health.
So for this experiment, we hypothesized that if you increase the indoor humidity, it would also increase the PM 2.5 levels in the enclosed space. This is how we tested it.
Okay, so what we decided to do is we took a 15-minute shower, and we tested the the humidity level and the PM 2.5 level of the bathroom that we were in for 5 minutes previous to taking the shower with the door open, and then we would turn on the shower and shut the door, and then test like how the humidity level rose, and also record the PM 2.5 level for 15 minutes, and then we recorded the so we had some problems with the Wi-Fi connecting to our phone for the wind halo thing, so we had to record it manually, actually, like every minute, what the PM 2.5 level was. Yeah.
So that we could get an average, and we repeated this for multiple trials, so we got the humidity and PM 2.5 levels previous to the shower to get kind of like a baseline that we could see if we could get the humidity and PM 2.5 levels back to that after the shower, see if it could return to normal. So just a little bit about the wind halo. It's just a device that monitors overall air quality, carbon dioxide levels, humidity, particulate matter, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and temperature. So sometimes you can get this to connect to your phone to download data onto it, or you can just set it up and see it manually.
Okay, so these are the results that we got from the graph. So obviously there's a correlation between the humidity and the overall PM 2.5 levels. It's interesting because as the humidity graph kind of increased steadily, as the time went on, the PM 2.5 kind of took a couple minutes for it to increase with the humidity, but there was a correlation.
Yeah, so the humidity increased a lot faster than the PM 2.5 levels, and we kind of attributed this to the fact that humidity would have to increase first, and then the PM 2.5 levels would follow if the humidity were to have a causation of an increase of PM 2.5. So we concluded that as humidity increases, PM 2.5 levels also increase in this enclosed space in the bathroom. They both increased over the same time intervals. They both increased when we turned on the shower and the humidity increased, and they both decreased immediately, as you can see, immediately after the shower stopped. You can also see that humidity increased faster and more drastically than the PM 2.5 levels, and both of them peaked at the 20 minutes, as you can see, right at the 20 minutes or right in the middle of that shower.
Some of like the global context of this is if you have an area that has low ventilation or like an enclosed space with high humidity, that could affect the overall air quality and the PM 2.5 levels of it, which can be harmful to your health.
And this also, as we did only do it indoors in an enclosed space, but this could also potentially be applicable to outdoors, which would be also an interesting study to look at in places that have high humidity, like places that are by the ocean that we don't really understand in Montana with having kind of a lower humidity.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
Yeah. That's all.
So we got time for one question.
Did you test any showers that use well water?
I'm not totally sure.
I think my shower is from well water, I'm pretty sure, but
I think mine is too.
yeah, I'm not sure though.
I think so. I think both of our showers run on well water, but I think that'd be interesting to see if that would affect it.
One more question.
Somewhere in the back, I don't know.
Do you think any outside factors could affect your results?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had to sit in there and take the thing manually while like one of my family members took the shower. So I think me moving around possibly affected it or anything.
Yeah, kind of where you place the wind halo has an effect on how humid it is, because like if it's closer to the shower, it's going to be more humid, or like higher up. I realized that the humidity levels were also higher than like if it was lower to the ground, so that would have an effect on it too.
Okay, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so my name is this right here.
Yeah, just push that arrow once, so it goes one screen at a time.
Just click right here.
Oh. You're on there for you. It's hard to look at the same time.
Oh,
There
okay.
you go. And then
All
my
right,
keys will help.
so my name is Eli Hathaway. I'm from Powell County High School, and my research project was on PM 2.5 levels and air fryer use. So the testable question that I had for this was, does the level of PM 2.5 increase when an air fryer is heated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 minutes? The hypothesis that I gained from this was that when the air fryer was heating, the PM 2.5 level would increase over the duration of the testing period. So the materials that I used was an air fryer with a 32 cubic inch basket, the PM 2.5 tracker that my science teacher provided with me. I also used a 6-inch tall 3D printed block, and I'll tell you that in a minute why I used that. Of course, I had to use a phone with the Wind app installed to be able to collect as much data as possible. And then in the air fryer basket was 6 ounces of chicken per run, and the digital scale was just there to make sure that that weight stayed consistent over the 6 runs. The experimental design that I had, I would place the air fryer on the counter with the rear facing towards the tracker, and that was sitting on the block. The block was there so that the rear outlet of the air fryer where the air would come out was pointing directly at the tracker. The phone with the Wind app was installed and just sitting behind the the 3D printed block, that was recording data. And then inside the air fryer was the 6 ounces of chicken. So this is the raw data over the 6 runs. You can see below that 50% of the data usually fell between about 7 points of each other. So this is the data analysis of what I had gathered. So I put trend lines on it to show the general trends of what the data was doing. 4 of the runs showed a general trend upward, and 2 of them showed a downward trend. So the sources of error that I think could have occurred from this is I tried to take all of the measurements in a short period of time to limit as many variables as possible, like the temperature, the atmospheric pressure, and all of that, and people in my house. So I wouldn't allow the air fryer to completely cool. I would take a 1-minute control period after each run to make sure that it would go back to a PM 2.5 level and then show if it increases or decreases. Another source of error that could have occurred was the heating element that's in the air fryer. When I looked in the manual, it is rated to plus or minus 3 degrees of what the advertised temperature is on it, so that could have been a big error. The conclusions that I had is that the general trend seems to support it. When the air fryer gained heat, the PM 2.5 level generally increased. Although there was a slight increase, the level never left safe zones for people, so that's good. I can't prove that the data definitively supports my hypothesis I made, because the data set that I collected is not conclusive enough to provide that definitive increase in it. If I were to repeat it again, though, I would create a better data set, so I would collect more data over more runs, over more time periods, and then I would also allow more time in between the runs to allow it to cool completely back down and record that temperature as well. And then these are just the sources that I use, and that's my presentation.
Got time for a couple of questions.
Shay.
Do you think if you used different fuels that it would have done something different?
I have no idea. I would have to test it and see, which, like I said, I'd have to take it over multiple runs, over time periods, and different heats probably.
I noticed on your graph, your first runs spiked significantly higher
So on that graph, that was actually the 6th run, the very top one. That's the 6th run. So over time, you can see the general increase of the control variables going up. So that was just the last run, and it was at the highest temperature.
How'd you prepare the chicken?
It was just de-thawed chicken, and I put it in the air fryer. Didn't even take time to season it or anything. So. I am not sure about that. I would assume that they would differ a little bit, that they'd probably go down because it would be a clean surface.
How big was the space you were cooking?
800 square feet.
Do you think that would make a difference?
If it were bigger or smaller, I think that a different size would allow the air to kind of disperse a little bit better. So I would like to try it in a bigger space, but my kitchen is not very big.
Just to follow up on her question, you did not clean the fryer?
No, it was left completely alone between each run.
So potentially there was like stuff in the bottom of the fryer, like gristle or something that might have been burning
Probably, yes.
in addition to the chicken?
Did you wait very long between each trial?
It was 1 minute in between each run.
Okay, one more question.
So was the chicken, like, did it still slap, though, when you were done?
Definitely, you know. Lots of chicken. It was 6 runs. It's a lot of chicken.
Good morning. My name is Isabel Swanson, and I am a 11th grader in Renee Rose Advanced Bio class, and this is...
Hi guys, I'm Jenna Hammond, and I'm also a junior in Miss Rose's Advanced Biology class, and we go to Libby Middle High School, and we did our research project on forest fire PM2.5 effects on victims of asbestos-related disease. So to begin, would you like to state our question?
Yes. What are the effects of forest fire particulate matter, or PM2.5, on individuals who are compromised with asbestos-related disease?
So one of our ideas while constructing our research is that we are from Lincoln County, which has a not so great grade for our air quality. And not only that, within all of Montana, we face forest fire season, and there are great effects of smoke on our breathing levels. Additionally, in Lincoln County, we have asbestos disease infected patients, and asbestos is a substance that is in vermiculite that has been used throughout Montana and is from mines in Libby, and if inhaled can cause great lung issues and affects a lot of people, mainly people who are older who inhaled it during the times it was used for construction. So hence our question. Would you like to state our null hypothesis?
I would. There will be no statistical correlation between the effects caused by PM2.5 on the lung capacity by the card clinic supplied patients during wildfire events.
Perfect. So to begin our procedure of our experiment, we got to visit the card clinic, which is the Center for Asbestos-Related Diseases, and they conduct research for these patients and also testing, and Bella got to experience one of these tests. Would you like to describe your experience?
So the tests are called like the pulmonary function test, and they're supplied by the card clinic, and it's the one and only in the world.
Yes.
And you technically get hooked up to this machine, and you breathe in, and it measures your peak flow, how much you expire in a single second.
Yes. So with these tests, patients will come in pretty much annually, and they'll see 7 to 8 patients a day. And so we collected data from the card clinic from 2019 through 2021 of these values, and we focused on one called FEV1, which means forced expiratory volume, so how much your lungs can hold in a single second. And we looked over these through forest fire season, and we also contacted the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, such as the DEQ from our Lincoln County Health Department, and collected PM2.5 levels also from 2019 through 2021 from daily averages, and wanted to focus on those of mostly forest fire season. Would you like to describe why we contacted the Forest Service?
We contacted the Forest Service, that way we have a reason or something to compare all of the data, the data from the card clinic to see if the the days where forest fires were more prevalent in the area and smoke was higher, that if they had any correlation to the readings of the patients from car clinics.
Yes. And some variables for our study, our independent variable was the PM2.5 levels that were recorded by the health department, and our dependent being the FEV1 predicted percentages, which we'll look at later, which were influenced by those levels, especially during forest fire season. And some constants were like the months and the dates that the data was collected. And would you like to describe our control?
Oh, yes, I would. Our control month was March due to the lack of springtime burning, wood fire smoke, and forest fire. We picked this month because it has the highest PM2.5 healthy rating.
Yes. So would you like to describe our results, beginning with graph 1?
So this graph shows the average for all the months of March between 2019 and 2021. The healthy level average for PM2.5 is the green line, and our March average, which is above the healthy line, is the orange line. As you can see, it spikes up and down and up and down.
Yes. And a couple things to note with this, our healthy levels are those 12 microns or below that we're looking at, and our March was a little bit higher than those healthy levels, and again it spikes throughout the years, and there's that huge spike in 2020 and constantly through 2021. And our second graph are these FEV1 predicted percentage levels during forest fire season. And yes, there are a lot of gaps in these. This is only because at the card clinic they're only open from Monday through Thursday, so we're lacking some data. But here we can see 2019, 2020, and 2021. But one thing to focus on, a healthy range for these predicted percentage levels is from 80 to 120%. So between these two purple lines here is what we were trying to look for, if it was considered healthy or not. And our monthly average for all the Marches that we looked at was also below this healthy range. So to carry on to our discussion.
So our result is that there's not enough data to necessarily make a correlation between the PM2.5 within forest fire smoke and the results from the card clinic and the patients that we received.
And also with that, our data that we collected from the Forest Service didn't completely correlate with those higher PM2.5 levels within forest fire season, so there were some errors to consider within that. And additionally, we were trying to see if it was a high PM2.5 day, if it were to correlate to a lower FEV1 level. But with that, there was some slight correlation, but it wasn't consistent, so we weren't able to make a final conclusion. Would you like to mention some uncontrollable variables?
So some things that we couldn't control with this data were not all the smoke in our valley came from forest fires around our county. And so that would mean from either other western states or even Canada per se. So that would definitely have a great effect on the PM2.5 levels in the air. Another thing is during the summer, people are more active. Allergies are more prevalent, and just dust is very common in the summer months. The weather can also play a huge effect on the quality of the air due to the rain washing or wind blowing it away.
And our main variable that is completely going to affect all of our data was the health of these patients. These patients that we were gathering this data from already have underlying health issues, so their breathing isn't going to be 100% on top amazing. So obviously these are already affected and will be already lower, so we couldn't make that final conclusion of their levels being lower along with the higher PM2.5 days. And these are people with underlying breathing issues such as mesothelioma, asbestosis, COPD, etc. So a lot of things to consider. Some things that we could do in the future if we were to repeat this study is instead of looking at averages of these patient values, was rather to look from patient to patient individually and say on a more regular basis instead of annually, say from spring to summer or summer to fall to see if there was some comparison. And additionally, maybe to see like a healthy person, such as Bella when she took her test, compared to a person who has already been inflicted with asbestos-related diseases. And what else can we look for in the future?
Yes. We can look for more forest fire data because that will always be supplied.
Yes.
More patients coming in and more data being supplied through the DEQ, obviously the card clinic. And so with more information further in the future, you definitely can make a better conclusion on if there's a correlation between the two.
Yes, and one thing lastly to add is that we could have possibly inspired the card clinic, so a little shout out. We have a cute little picture with their sign out in front of their clinic. And to maybe further this research to see if forest fire affects truly asbestos-related patients. So our final conclusion was that yes, there may be a correlation between higher PM 2.5 days during forest fire season and the lower FEV1 percentage levels of the card clinic patients, but it was not direct and we cannot make a final conclusion due to many factors which we just previously included. And here are our references. We included a lot within our data, and we are open for questions.
Got time for one question.
Yes. Over here.
So I was wondering, are you using any of your own data that you collected through the air quality trackers or just outside sources?
We only did data crunching for this project due to using years like 2019 through 2021, but yeah.
Yes, and so all of the data that we collected were from these outside organizations. We didn't collect it ourselves, but we did all the crunching and averaging all ourselves with the data we were given. So, all right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. We are from Columbia Falls. I'm Riley Garner, and this is Alyssa Williams. And we decided to take the comparison of air particulates in gas trucks and diesel trucks. For our central question, we were, again, what kind of truck motor emissions are worse for a person to inhale, combustions or diesel? And if our hypothesis is if we test the motor emissions of diesel trucks against emissions of combustion engine trucks, then the emissions from the diesel trucks will contain more harmful particulate matter to humans.
Alrighty, so for our background information, particulates that are smaller than 2.5 micrometers in diameter pose a greater risk to the health of the respiratory system. So the particulate matter found in car exhaust of diesel and combustion engines are found to have these size of particles in different forms, including soot and sulfur dioxide. These harmful chemicals can lead to respiratory diseases like pneumonia, influenza, and even contribute to stunting lung development. And so our pictures up there are they're microscopic views of the different particulate matters that are found in the exhaust of car engines. So our materials we used were we used 2 diesel trucks and 2 gas trucks. And then we also looked up electric truck data because we didn't have one available. And then we used the wind air tracker and our paired device. So the materials and the procedure we used, so we measured the air quality before we turned on the trucks. And so they'd be turned on for 5 minutes while measuring the air quality. And after the measurement of the truck, we'd turn it off so that we could allow for the exhaust to disperse. And we wouldn't start it for 3 more minutes. And we performed 4 trials, but each trial would have like a different type of vehicle. So there was a range of measurements. We graphed the data and we concluded how the exhaust would affect the respiratory health in an average adult. And our variables, our independent was the diesel and gas trucks. Our dependent was air quality, and the control was our electric truck emissions.
So, funny story, I had to look up how to read one of these on the way here. So I learned the number in the middle is the median. And in our diesel trucks, they were fairly low numbers. And then in our gas trucks, they were a little bit lower. So just looking at the box and whiskers, our data would support our hypothesis on the diesel creating more emissions. As you can see, electric trucks do not produce exhaust, which is why we use it as the control. But if you know anything about electric trucks, they're worse for the environment because they contribute to heat waste. because they die very quickly. But anyway.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So it's a little easier for you guys to read. We created just like a little like data table, and it shows all of our median values that from our box and whisker plots. And so it shows that our median values from our diesel trucks were a lot higher than our gas trucks. So it supports our hypothesis that the emissions are a lot worse.
And one thing to add, we only ran them while they were idle. And so that falls into our next steps. If we were to do this again, we would like to record the data if the car was moving, because after we collected the data, I got the friends I tested on to hit the gas, and instantly it shot up to like the 600 range, and it was like crazy number. But on idle, it just stayed at a normal about 15 to 40 range and settled out throughout the 5-minute period. And the initial exhaust blast when we turned on the car also hit that 600 peak.
So our sources of error were, we couldn't really control the type of gas that each truck used, whether it was leaded or unleaded, the environment we were in, because we didn't test it in an enclosed space. We were outside, so we couldn't control the wind or anything, which would be pretty cool, but we couldn't do that. And the kind of truck model, what gas station the gas came from, because every gas station has a different type of, like their gas is a little bit different. And also our hypothesis was supported. The data shows that there are more air particulates that are present in the diesel truck emissions rather than the gas truck. And from these particles, it would be more detrimental to people that, like, especially work around these types of engines, like mechanics and diesel technicians. And these are our references. Yes. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Did you test if there were any ambient particles around the exhaust while the truck wasn't running?
Do you mind explaining what that is? Oh.
So your truck is in a driveway, and maybe it was run some other time of the day. Did you test before turning it on if there were any ambient particles still remaining on the truck, I guess?
No, we did not.
Yeah.
So how were you testing? Like, where did you put the wind tracker? Was it like in the car?
I'm glad you asked. So I literally took something and placed it right in front of the exhaust and put the wind tracker on top of that little, like, say a book or like some gas container, and just let it sit there.
And also, you can't like put the wind tracker like really close to the tailpipe, because it doesn't read anything, because it kind of just goes like around the wind tracker, and also it's really hot, because the emissions are really hot, so you burn yourself. So you have to put it like 6 to 8 inches away from the tailpipe. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. Did you guys do any testing on like newer diesel engines that have diesel exhaust fluid with it, like that?
We don't know the specific car models of the diesels, but the gas combustions, I know were a Ford F-150 and a 250.
Mm-hmm.
Got time for one more question.
Yeah, back there.
Do you think that including an average or a mean of your data would have provided a larger range for your analysis? Because a median is only like the center data point rather than just like an average inclusive all.
Yes, I believe so. I think it would, and we were going to do that, but it would be bigger than the screen right here. So we just stuck with median values because they were easier to read, as well as the fact that during the trials we looked at the raw data and did averages, and the results were quite the same. The diesels still had more particulates.
Thank you.
Okay, can't turn it on. Okay, good? All set. Okay, ready? Okay, so my name's Elsa Miller.
I'm Laurie Davidson.
And we tested the effects of rosin on PM 2.5 concentrations. We go to Corvallis High School, and our science teacher is Mr. Hamill.
Okay, so the big question here is, does the presence of rosin dust affect PM 2.5 concentrations in the classroom?
Okay, so our hypothesis was if people who are playing string instruments with rosin, then the amount of PM 2.5 in a room will be significantly higher than before due to rosin dust. So rosin is it's a hard substance from tree resin, which is similar to tree sap. It's used to increase the friction between the bow and the string. In the classroom we tested, there was basses, cellos, violas, and violins. So you put it on your bow before the class begins, and then you play with it. We have participated in the Corvallis High School Orchestra, Corvallis Orchestra, since 5th grade. And rosin is essential to playing and performing string instruments at both professional and beginner levels.
So the procedure, we used our wind tracker and we put it in the middle of the classroom during a 5th grade class period. So there was around 25 students. And then took the readings for about 10 minutes. We also, as a control, did the classroom empty of students for about an hour before, just to get that baseline. And then we also did a guitar class, which was just to do a class where there was no rosin used. So guitar, not rosin, just students in the classroom, same place, interacting with the air.
Okay, so this is the data from our testing of the 5th grade orchestra class with them using rosin and playing their instruments. So as you can see here, at the beginning of class, it was fairly low. Once they started playing, it spiked significantly in both our tests. And after a while, after 5 minutes or so, it began to settle down and average out around 200.
Which is still definitely in the unhealthy or hazardous range. Okay, so it's important to note on this graph that our scale is different. So this is significantly lower than the previous. But this is the empty classroom, the green line, compared to the guitar class. As you can see, the guitar class is still a pretty high number. Our hypothesis for this was the carpet kind of holds onto that rosin dust, and it being an orchestra room for the last 20 years, made some residual dust.
The reason that in music rooms have carpet is because of the sound quality. So the carpet is sort of necessary, but yeah, we're thinking that the agitation of the carpet could have affected this. So this is all of our data. So the purple line is the average between our two tests from the orchestra class with the 5th graders. All of them started fairly low. Obviously the green line significantly lower. And again, when the students began playing, it peaked, and then over time it averaged out to around 200, which is either unhealthy or very unhealthy.
Okay, so in conclusion, this is definitely an effect that it's having on our orchestra classroom in Corvallis. So ways we could have improved this is increase the sample size. Also, there's a little inconsistency with what classes were before the orchestra class. There was an orchestra class before guitar, so kind of might have thrown it off a little bit. We also could sample multiple times of year or day because this was over a couple-week period, so it might have changed a little bit. We also had a little bit of problems with the wind tracker. Sometimes we just turned it on and it was at 1,000 and wouldn't go down, so might have been a little weird. We just took our normal ones. So solutions to this problem, a cloth mask can help for your lungs if somebody had asthma. Also adequate ventilation, so opening a window in between class periods might help. Obviously, sometimes it's freezing, so not always applicable.
Another option is to deep clean the carpets more frequently or more in depth. The carpets are cleaned every summer, but maybe the orchestra room could be cleaned more often to help out the classroom.
Okay, and the reason that we wanted to test this, the first sort of thing that prompted us to do this, is our orchestra teacher, his throat was getting sore, and he was like, so then he started to use a microphone. So we were a little curious on whether the rosin affected that at all. Anything else?
There was also a few students with asthma in the orchestra program who had kind of said how they struggled a little bit with just breathing in the room, which led to thinking this might be a possible reason.
Also, important to note, when you play the violin or viola, you are playing directly next to your face. So with a bass or a cello, where you're either sitting down or standing up, and your bow and the string is away from your face, a violin and viola is closer.
And those are our
Those are
references.
Reference. Okay. Any questions?
How many students are in the orchestra class?
There's about 24, and there's like 2 basses, 5 cellos, and a bunch of violins and violas.
There's also a similar number in guitar classes.
Similar number in the guitar class. I think it might have been 27.
Do you think that the size of the room would affected the readings?
I do think it would. All of the room readings was the same room, so guitar and orchestra are in the same place, so those comparisons were probably the same, but I definitely think a bigger room would help. We have a very small orchestra room, and so it's a little squished.
What kinds of rosin did you guys use? Because I know like base rosin is thicker and they can produce different types of particles.
Right, that's a good question. Because it was in the 5th grade orchestra class has bassists, cellists, violists, and violinists. There was all types of rosin. There was the base rosin, the dark rosin, and the light rosin, all of which are different, but they sort of averaged out because it is one room. Yeah.
So besides the start of the class, how often was the room like disturbed? Like how often did students get up, walk around, like disturbing the carpet?
So at the beginning, so they do not move around much. Once they get their instruments, get their music and stuff, they sort of stay still. Maybe 1 or 2 kids move around, like go to the bathroom or something. But other than that, not much movement from the kids.
I was wondering, you said that there was an orchestra class before the guitar class?
Right, so
did you get a baseline reading after the orchestra class had cleared out of there before measuring the guitar data?
So what's interesting about the before thing, there was an orchestra class before the guitar class in the morning. So there was an orchestra class first period, and we tested the guitar class third period, which is, I don't know, classes are an hour and a half long. So no, we did not get a test directly after the class ended, but we think that because of that time, the rosin had time to settle, and that is probably why when they were walking around, it agitated the carpet.
So you think that guitar data is real, and it's probably just from dust being stirred up?
Absolutely.
Because it had about 2 hours
Yeah.
in between.
Or more than 2 hours. Yes.
Did you consider having a test of the room with, if you had just people in the room?
So that's sort of what the guitar class is for, because we're testing how rosin affects the PM2.5 concentrations. So
Guitars
are not using rosin. So we were like, it's a similar movement in the room. They're still like getting music, and they're still setting up chairs and sitting down in a similar formation. So we thought that the guitar class was a good control for just kids in the room.
Yeah, I think that was a room, and I apologize for the way I'm reading this, perhaps as a control room that had never had rosin in it.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Right.
Yeah.
So never had rosin in it, like, ever?
Another similar
Right.
size class.
So we did do that. We did go to the, so we walked around the building that it was in. We went into the art room, which has never had rosin in it, has had clay in it. But, and that, when we walked in there and set that down for about 5 minutes, averaged at around 5, which is safe. And then we went into the other high school building, it was around 3. So, yes, but not, the art room and the orchestra room are similar sizes, so yeah. Any other questions?
All right, great job, thank you.
Okay. My name is Kara Fortner. And I'm Katie Byrne, and we're from Anaconda High School in Advanced Biology, taught by Kate Mattern. Our project today is PM 2.5 levels when batching concrete. Concrete is a mix of mason sand, gravel, cement, and different chemicals. Aggregate, which is the sand in the rock, goes through a process where it is heated, spun, and fed through conveyor belts. In some concrete mixes, different chemicals are used in order to have a larger or smaller slump, help the concrete set up faster, and even water substitutes. So we picked this topic because Kara's grandparents own S&N, and it's a concrete batching plant, and she spends a lot of time there. Our question and our hypothesis are, will the amount of PM 2.5 change based on different rooms in the batch plant? So our method was that we used the wind tracker device and we placed it on the desk in the operating room of S&N. And this room is completely closed off and isolated from the main batching room. This room controls the amount of aggregate, chemicals, and cement that goes in the concrete mixer. And we tested on a day where they use 3,000 pump mix, which is just like a certain type of concrete mix. And the wind tracker device was then placed in the middle of the floor in the chemical room, which is a small room enclosed in the main room in the batch plant where all the chemicals are measured and put into the mixer truck. And then lastly, we used the wind tracker and we placed it underneath the conveyor belt in the main batching room, which is like the big open room where the bins and conveyor belts are and where the materials are put in the mixer truck. Okay, so for the pictures, we can just go left to right. So on the left, it's the outside of the batch plant, so it's like that big building. And then the one next to that is the chemical storage, so those big like bins, I guess, are where all the chemicals are stored. And then the one next to that is the outside, so that bin on the right-hand side gets filled, the conveyor belt goes up, and then it drops into the batch plant. Then the next one is the operating room, so that's the desk. That's pretty much like the one that's isolated from everything else. And then the next one is the bin with another conveyor belt that goes into the truck. And then the one next to that is where the chemical room is. So our data collection, we just did line graphs, and from left to right, so first it was the main room, and it got up to around 4,600, which is super high and extremely unhealthy. And then in the operating room, which is like the closed off room with its own ventilation and stuff, it only got up to about 160, which is pretty healthy. And then in the chemical room, it got up to around like 850. And the controlled tests were taken on a day where there was no concrete being batched, and it was on like a Sunday, so that the concrete like wasn't being batched or anything, and the dust had settled and stuff. And all the levels of PM 2.5 were between like 14 and 98, which were pretty healthy. And the levels of PM 2.5 in the main room range from 102 to about 250. The levels in the chemical room range from about 50 to 130. And then the levels of PM 2.5 were taken with 15-second intervals. So our conclusion, we can confidently say that our hypothesis was supported. We concluded that there was a clear difference in the levels of PM 2.5 in our 3 different testing rooms while batching concrete. We tested on 3 different days, each with the same type of concrete being batched was the 3,000 pump mix. One of the variables we could not control though was the weather. On the 3rd test day, it rained heavily the night before, making the aggregate wet, so it was dusty going into the batch plant. So do you want to finish it out? So to get more accurate data next time, we would definitely take the tests where the weather was like the same, so it wouldn't affect the results. So yeah. And then these are just our references. So. I think
Questions? Yeah.
Did your results have any effect on estimating?
No, so my dad runs it and I work there. But we talked to the owners and they basically just said there are precautions going into place because the levels are so high. So as of right now, it's all okay. But it's kind of funny because OSHA showed up the day after and did the same thing that we did, so. Any more questions?
I'm sorry.
You can go.
What were your units measured? Like what unit did you use for your measurements?
Micrograms per meter cubed.
Just curious, do you know if there is a correlation between concrete workers and health, respiratory disease?
Yeah, so our last reference there, that's actually a study done, and it's done on like several different types of construction workers. So there's like masonry, like dirt workers, so like gravel workers, like concrete, stuff like that. So there is a health thing, but you have to take into other factors too, because a lot of them do smoke cigarettes, so that also has a big health matter too.
Hi everybody, how's it going? Pretty good. So my name is Charlie Snellman and I did this presentation titled Pets and Particulate Matter. Who in here owns pets, specifically dogs? Yeah, see most of us? So that's why I did this, experiment, because over 70% of all American households own pets, specifically dogs. So, let's see. So that led me to my question, do dogs affect the air quality of our homes? Since most of us have dogs, you'd think it was a really related health concern. So my independent variable of this experiment was the dogs present. My dependent variable was the air quality based on PM 2.5 AQI ratings, which is a scale on 0 to 500. And then my control group was the house without dogs or pets of any kind. And then my constants were the materials used, both the houses that I used for testing stayed the exact same, and the testing periods during the day were the same. So my hypothesis was if the PM 2.5 is tested in the air of two houses, then there will be more PM 2.5 in the house with dogs than the house without dogs, because dogs create dander. And what dander is it's tiny particles of dead skin cells, hair, and dirt that is mixed with saliva when dogs are scratching or licking themselves, and that's released into the air. Like I said, this matters because over 70% of Americans own dogs and other pets. And dander can be especially dangerous because it is typically really small, classified as PM 2.5, and very easily inhaled, which can act as a carrier for lots of various diseases. So these are the materials I used. I used two houses, one with dogs, one without dogs. Two dogs, mini Australian Shepherds. Those aren't mini Australian Shepherds. Pencil to record my data, notebook paper to record the immediate results, MacBook Pro laptop with internet access to create the graphs and type this presentation. And then a wind PM 2.5 detector, which was supplied by my teacher, Miss Placco, and two iPhones, both with the Wind app installed. Then the experimental procedure goes as follows. First, I gathered all the materials that I would need that I just listed. And then I used my phone and the Wind tracker with the app installed to view all the results of my tests. And then I tested a bedroom, a basement of the control house and the experimental house twice each with the Wind monitor at the same time of day. And I left the monitor in the room for at least a full minute because I noticed when I first brought it into the room, the levels would fluctuate, so I waited for it to stay the same before I recorded a value and moved on to the next room. And then, like I said, I used the computer to average, analyze, and graph all the data. And I used averages of all my data to create a more encompassing graph. And so here's the raw data. So you can see the bedroom test 1, bedroom test 2, and then the averages of everything were significantly different in the house with dogs and without dogs. The overall averages in the house without dogs in AQI is 3.5, and then in the house with dogs was 63.5. And that may seem like a really big difference, but the air quality doesn't get hazardous until a level of about 100 to 150. So the data collected showed a significant effect of the dogs present in the house on the air quality. With the dogs in the house, the overall average of air quality stood at a moderate rating of 63.5 on the AQI index, which is right there for reference. And this is compared to the air quality in the house without dogs at a near perfect overall AQI score of 3.5. In each room, this trend was apparent as well. The average AQI of the bedroom in the house without dogs was significantly higher than the overall average at 4.5. Slightly higher, not significantly higher, sorry. Which is still a good score on the AQI index. And the average AQI of the bedroom in the house with dogs was still significantly higher than the house without dogs. And so I concluded that my hypothesis was supported by the data we collected, because I hypothesized that the data would show a significant increase of the dogs in the house on the AQI rating. And from this evidence, we inferred that owning dogs does pollute the air to the detriment of the air quality. And since dogs create dander, and dander is already a known pollutant in many American households, that was most likely the pollutant in our experiment. However, like I said earlier, the AQI chart is a scale of 0 to 500, so it's not dangerous to have dogs as your pets, I promise. And a very small number of specific individuals with very high sensitivities to ozone and particle pollution will experience any symptoms from this level of air quality. Some potential sources of error. First, include the size and age of the houses and dogs, different breeds of dogs. Some dogs don't shed, which will dramatically increase or decrease the amount of dander released into the air. How many people are living in the house? People also shed and create PM 2.5 through their daily activities. And also how often the houses are cleaned, because collecting dust, and like in the rosin experiment, when the carpet is agitated, then it releases more PM particles into the air. And if we were, I'm speaking for my partner who's not here today, if we were to perform the same exact experiment, we would do more trials to ensure a wider range of data and ensure that there are more constant variables, because we noticed there were lots of things that could have affected our data, such as the breeds of dogs, other pets that were present, and the houses and sizes of the families. And I used the U.S. National Library of Medicine, an article from the American Lung Association, and the Handbook to Air Quality from the United States Environmental Protections Agency. So thank you very much. I'll now take a couple questions if we have time. Yeah, they're relatively similar. They both had 2 stories, not including the basement, which we also measured, and roughly the same size of the families. My partner's family is 4 people, and my family is 5 people. Yeah?
Are the dogs cute?
Yes, my dogs are amazing. Yeah.
This isn't a question, but just a note. It would be interesting to include or to compare caged animals versus uncaged animals.
Yeah.
Because the dogs and cats are free roaming in the home, so they can get up in the furniture, they can be in the kitchen where cooking takes place. But then, so you would think it might be more, but with caged animals like a guinea pig or hamsters, that air quality might be concentrated
Around that area.
but then it would be interesting to see if that dust traveled
Or dispersed.
outside of the room where that cage was kept. So just when you say pets and, I think it was pets and particulate matter, it would be really comprehensive to do, I'm glad you mentioned like the size of the dogs, because that was a question of mine, was if you guys consider doing large breeds versus poodle, really small.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to do a wider range of animals and how they're housed.
Yeah, I was really interested in that as well. We also have cats, which is what could have influenced this, because cats also lick themselves to clean themselves all the time. So that would also influence our data. Yeah.
Yes, did you control for window use in the homes?
For window use? Not really. We usually open them at night during the summer months. This data was taken during April, so we weren't opening windows or using candles or anything else that could have spiked or influenced the air moving throughout the house. Yeah?
Could you have tested, what would happen if like a dog had fleas? Because they tend to scratch more.
Yeah, they would scratch more and create different kinds of dander too as well. Yeah, you way in the back. Yeah, so the ventilation of both houses was fairly steady throughout the day, just through opening and closing of doors. Like I said, there wasn't any irregular opening of windows or anything during the testing period, and it was the same time, so the ventilation should have been the same time, same levels, I guess. So, yeah.
What time of day did you do this?
In the evening, before bed.
Second part of the question.
Yeah.
Did you have people or the dogs in the house or the room while you were taking these measurements?
Yeah, so in the rooms that we were taking, it was just us and the air quality tracker. The dogs were not in the room while we were taking the test. We also, another reason I forgot to mention this, we decided to test the basement and the bedroom because the dogs are often snuggling with us in our beds, which it would create more PM2.5 concentrated in those areas. And the basement, because it's cooler down there and they don't really hang out there as much, which could also affect, you could also see that on the graph. Let's see, I can go back and show, just in the data, the basement tests were lower compared to the bedroom tests, which could be attributed to the different times that the dogs hang out in there.
Okay.
Cool, thank you guys.
Okay, so now we're going to do the poster session. So who has a poster? Raise your hand again. All right, so for you guys, what you're going to do is you're going to go out and stand by your posters. Okay, we got 9 more to get through, and then we're done, and we go out for lunch and enjoy the sun. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling here. So first one up is SKC.
All right, I'm Dylan Johnson. I'm from Polson, Montana. I go to Polson High School, and I'm in dual enrollment, Salish Community College, STEM Academy. All right. And during this research project, I was researching how chopping firewood affected the PM 2.5 levels. As someone who was chopping firewood once or twice a week, trying to heat the house, I of course noticed the amount of wood dust that gets kicked up while chopping it, and I was curious on if it affected the PM 2.5 levels at all. In my research prior to the experiment, I found that wood dust often causes adverse health effects, especially in woodworking jobs, asthma and nasal cancer, to name a few, and this is according to the Canadian Centre of Occupational Health and Safety. All right, before testing, I hypothesized that if chopping firewood created fine dust, then the PM 2.5 levels would be higher through the chopping process compared to before. To test this, I of course had to have some firewood, my axe, some gloves, my wind tracker, and my notebook to record the data that I recorded. And right here you can kind of see how my setup looked. For my methodology, to start my experiment, I recorded all my control variables, so they wouldn't change. So it's like stuff like how far the chopping was away from my house, because we had fires going all the time. Although during this process, I tried to make sure that we didn't have a fire going, but I did have an outlier that was likely caused by this later on if you look at the data. So beginning my trials, I set my tracker like in the previous slide, just right next to where I was chopping firewood. And I tested the PM 2.5 levels before creating the control variable, and I tested, so then I chopped the wood, then I wrote down what the highest recorded PM 2.5 level was. All right. So all of these processes kind of took like around 2 minutes. I started it, like I said before, I recorded it before, I chopped the wood, I recorded the highest, and then during that process, this little 2 minute time period, it usually, it went right back down to the before PM 2.5. So it was didn't last very long. And despite the variation in the, just the small amount of variation between the two, between the before PM 2.5 levels and the highest, the relationship was pretty clear between them. Yeah. So graphing the data, like I said before, I excluded the outliers because it was there was the 400 and the 442 and the 405, and it just made the graphing unlegible. So I excluded them, and like I said before, it was I was pretty sure that it was due to someone in the house lighting up a fire, and the smoke kind of caused that high outlier. Analyzing the rest of the data, however, I noticed a clear difference between my auto-recorded data from the tracker, which is the wind data in blue, and the data that I recorded myself in the notebook, so that's the green and the orange. And I was thinking that this is probably due to the times at which the tracker actually records the data. And looking at the app, it records every few seconds. So it very likely just skipped out on the high PM 2.5 levels that I saw and recorded. All right, for the relevance, with the health risks and the amount of people that need wood fire in Montana and then North America in general, I figured that it's important to ascertain the different aspects of chopping wood and wood dust, such as the PM 2.5 levels. In retrospect, I think I could have kept track better of a lot of the different variables, like the type of wood. There was quite a few different types of wood that we ended up having, and I was chopping, but I tried to keep it kind of consistent. And whether there was rot at all, because rot often causes a lot more wood dust, and just a few smaller things. And I also want, of course, more data, because bigger sample size always is better. And although my data does correlate cutting wood in a higher PM 2.5 level, like I said, the data set is quite small, and more tests needs to be done before any concrete conclusions can be made. And there are my acknowledgements. Any questions?
What would you do to minimize your exposure while you're chopping wood?
Well, I was thinking, like one of the other presenters were talking about earlier, just having a mask. It's kind of hard, especially for those woodworkers, like someone in a sawmill yard or something like that, wearing a mask all the time. It might be a little annoying, but if it's going to be protecting you from harmful PM 2.5 levels that you're constantly being subject to, then it'd probably be worth it.
Do you know what type of wood produced the higher level
No, I'm not sure. Like I said, I that's one of the things I want to kind of, if I were to do another set of experiments, I would want to keep track of the types of wood. I'd probably test different types, but I'm actually not quite sure which ones I did I was chopping those days. I think it might have been fir because we usually use wood for our fires.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
This is our RMS Ridge Air Quality Project. My name is Brian Green. I'm from Ronan Middle School and I'm in 8th grade. My name is Matea Stevens. I'm also from Ronan Middle School and I'm in 8th grade.
I'm Lexi Gochi. I'm from Ronan High School. I'm a senior and I am their student advisor. I did this program last year and I'm walking them through the process this year.
So our hypothesis was if the middle school air quality is better for learning than the high school air quality, then the PM 2.5 levels will be lower in the middle school during school hours. The reason we chose to do the schools was because we figured being in school for 8 hours a day might be important to know the PM 2.5 levels we were learning in.
Based on our background information, we predicted that the middle school air quality would be better than the high school air quality because it's a newer building and newer air filtrations.
I didn't format.
So some of the materials we used were the wind air quality tracker. We used two different kinds. We used PM 2.5 and PM 10. We used our wind air quality tracker on our cell phones and the Ronan High School and Middle School to collect the data, a data sheet and a camera. We went to the location we were going to collect our data and we got the average PM 2.5 levels. We recorded them for 5 minutes. We recorded the different properties of it and we did this for about 2 weeks. And that's it.
So this was, all of that information she just said is on the slide, but it was supposed to format, so some technical difficulties there.
These are the places where we took our data, the middle school classrooms and the high school classroom and then the gyms.
This is our graph for the high school classroom and gym. The high school classroom had a higher average PM 2.5 level than the high school gym did. This is our middle school classroom and our middle school gym data collection, and this was the exact opposite of the high school. The middle school gym had higher levels than the high school classroom did.
This is all our data put into one graph. The high school classroom has a high peak in the data, and then the middle school classroom is the lowest. We think that the high school classroom had the high peak because it's a science lab, and it might have been the lab that day.
So we collected the mean, median, and mode for both the high school and middle school gyms and classrooms, and that was just a little math we did.
We could have been done better planning things ahead and making sure we do put all our data on the same time of day. And this project helped us knowing what PM 2.5 levels are, and it walked us through the scientific process.
Okay, so we live on the Flathead Indian Reservation, so this project had a lot of cultural relevance because respiratory system diseases are responsible for a little over 10% of hospitalizations. So with that being such a big part of our population, it's important to take this into account because it's a higher percentage with our Indian population. So we can use this data in our classrooms and even go further with the reservation. Oh, sorry. So being that I'm using this as like a community service project to help get young girls involved in STEM careers, I created things like this so that they can walk through and use questions to, what questions do we need to ask when we're being scientists in fields specifically with air quality.
These are the sites that we used throughout our project to help us.
We would like to say thank you to Ronan School District for letting us use their facilities. Thank you to the Science Education Partnership Award, REACH, for letting us be a part of the program, and the University of Montana today.
you're pointing.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah, you first, and then we can go back.
Okay. So when you guys ran your tests, were there any people in any of the classrooms or gyms?
Yeah, so what was interesting about it was that when we did have the high peak in our data, there wasn't anybody in the classroom, which is good. But I'll let you guys elaborate further.
So with the high peak in the high school classroom, there was like 3 people in the classroom and the windows were open and it was like an average of 39%.
And then I think you had a question.
I was just gonna ask, you might have said it, but did you do the testing at the same time each day? And if so, what time of day was that?
So because we did this during school hours, because that is when it's most relevant to us, these 5 days that we analyzed were the days where we had consistent data. Like they were both during first period, they were in the classrooms, and then during sixth period, they were both in the gyms. So that is why we just had like those 5 days on there, and they were testing the classrooms at the same time, they were testing the gyms at the same time.
But they were different times of day, like the classrooms and the gym?
Yeah, they were different times of day, but it was during the school day. Yes.
Do you know what year the high school was built?
I don't know exactly what year, but I know that it is a little over 20 years older. So it puts that in like the 80s is when the high school was built. Yes, back there.
You mentioned you tested a science classroom in the high school. What kind of classroom did you test in middle school?
It was a math classroom. Any other questions?
All right, great job, guys.
Thank you.
All right, hello, my name is Emma Purrier. I'm from Big Sky High School, and I am in the Chemistry 2 class, and my partners are...
I'm Cindy McGrath. Madison Glossner could not be here today, and Holden is up there. Give us a wave. Thank you. All right. Our idea. So, how does foot and vehicular traffic affect PM 2.5 and AQI levels in an area, specifically hiking trails around Missoula?
And then our hypothesis for this question would be that at the high times for the trails, the PM 2.5 levels would be higher because there would be many more cars and people around, and so they would be giving off those particles. All right, and so PM 2.5 is a particle that's very small, and we have a little picture here that shows the difference between them and hair and pollen. And so it's very easy for it to get everywhere. And then AQI kind of gives like the air quality overall, and PM 2.5 goes into that.
So we ended up using the wind quality air tracker, just a small one. We kind of just set it next to us. And our locations. So we chose our locations based on our personal knowledge of different places around Missoula and how busy they can be. And then we chose our days to go and when to go based off of that. So we did the Rattlesnake Main Trailhead, the Crazy Canyon Trail in Patty Canyon, the Blue Mountain Trailhead, and here's our method.
All right. So we had a lot of steps, but we can kind of condense it here. So we traveled to each location twice. We did a high time and a low time to see if there was a difference between them. And we sat in the same spot each time, and so that they would be more accurate. And we made tallies in a notebook of how many cars and people there were. And we also did passing cars depending on where it was, because if it was close enough to the air tracker, it would have affected it. And then for each time we were there, we did 30 minutes, and it collected data every 5 minutes. So overall, we were at each location for an hour, and then we took pictures of the graphs at the end of each time, and then we compared and contrasted them to the other time at the same place and then the other places.
All right, so our results. They were fairly conclusive despite the windy weather conditions with some of the later data collection times. We do think that they messed with some of the data points. The graphs you see up here are our first ones when the air was stagnant. We didn't have any wind that day or rain. That one would be the M, and that would be the rattlesnake main trailhead. As you can see, the M went all the way up into the moderate, and both of these were over a half-hour period of time, and we collected both the PM 2.5 and the AQI. All right. We did have weather interference, which we know did affect our data just based on previous data points and our high and low times. The air quality was worse than the overall Missoula air quality as shown by the trackers, because this one, the AQI, was 52 for moderate. This was the M main trailhead, the high time, and it was 17 in Missoula at the same time. Now, as Emma has mentioned previously, we did count the people who were coming off of the trail, people who arrived, the cars in the parking lot, cars passing by. We did not, however, count dogs, as we did not think that they were too relevant, because we were looking at the human impact, not animal interference and impact brought to the places. All right. And despite the uncontrolled weather conditions, our results indicated that more people using the trail, the higher the AQI and PM 2.5 particle count.
All right, and there's a couple things we would have done different if we were to do this again. We tried to go about the same high times for each time, but because of the weather conditions, they weren't as accurate. So I feel like if we were to do this again, we'd try to go on days where they were similar weather conditions. We were kind of limited on when we had time to take data because of our schedules. And so the set times we had is when we went, and that just happened to be when it was rainy and windy. But it's really good to see that difference between the sunny and warm and the windy and rainy. And yeah, I feel like we could have gone to more locations, and we could have collected more data from each place as well.
And as for our global results and stuff, or harm, whatever, we figured that actually in going to these places, as seen on the previous slide, it can actually be doing you more harm than good sometimes to be getting out, which we found was really interesting. So, yeah. And our resources were the epa.gov/air pollution and the airnow.gov/AQI websites.
Where did you set the wind tracker? You said it was just next to you, like was it in the grass or on the trail?
So we tried to find pretty clear spots next to us. We tried to get close to the main trail itself, well, still in the parking lot, so we could collect the data from the cars as well. And near when we would get people to go by, so we could get as much accurate data as possible. We kind of just went based on the trailheads themselves.
Hey, my name is Zach Streit.
I'm Linnea Gedney.
I'm Zach Hoagland.
This is our REACH project. We were measuring the vehicle exhaust in PM 2.5. We go to Valley Christian, and this is our chemistry elective with Noel Gladwell. We all know never to leave a vehicle running in a closed environment, but what actually happens to the air quality? Do different ages and size of engine vehicles have different effects on the air quality? We decided to test 4 different vehicles and 1 ATV to see what effects they had on the air quality. Each vehicle is either newer than 2006 to 2008 or older than 1995 to 1999, with a different size engine ranging from 1.2 to 5.3 liters. Exhaust systems in cars release toxic compounds into the air. Particulate matter, PM 2.5, violet organic compounds, VOCs, nitrogen oxides, NOx, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, greenhouse gases. Today we're measuring PM 2.5. Some of the health effects of exhaust fumes. Particulate matter is a smaller molecule that gets into the lungs and embeds itself in them. Diesel engines cause PM 2.5 in much higher concentration than other engines. Particulate matter 2.5 was measured in this project because we had monitors available for the size of particulate. Long-term exposure to PM 2.5 associated with an increase in the long-term risk of cardiopulmonary mortality by 6 to 13% per micrograms per meter cubed.
All right, our research question was, in a controlled environment, how does exhaust from different vehicles affect air quality? Our hypothesis was we predicted that older vehicles with bigger engines will have a greater effect on the air quality. Older vehicles have less air pollution prevention technology in them because air pollution prevention wasn't a top priority when these vehicles were designed and manufactured. Different sizes of engines, measured in liters, will also produce different amounts of exhaust because of the input and output, such as oil, fuel, exhaust, varies with engine size. Okay, for the materials, we used a Honda Pilot, a Honda Civic, Yamaha Bayou, Willys Jeep CJ5, Chevy Suburban, the Wind Monitor, and enclosed environment, which was the shop. There's a picture of the shop.
All right, some of the experiments variables in this experiment was the age of the car engine and also the size of the engine in liters. And some of the controlled variables were the time that the car was in the garage that was in a closed environment, and the day we did it on. We did it kind of all in the same time, so temperature was about the same too. And the placement of the monitor was just in the back behind the car near the exhaust. We idled each vehicle for approximately 10 minutes before closing it, and then we put the vehicle in the shop and closed all the doors and left it for 10 minutes while the wind tracker took measurements. And then after 10 minutes of measurement, we pulled the vehicle out and let the shop ventilate until the numbers on the wind PM 2.5 air monitor read normal levels. Then after ventilation, we pulled the next warmed up vehicle into the shop. Here is the 2008 Honda Pilot. It's the first car we tested, and that's the graph for that car. Here's the Honda Civic with the graph for that car. And you see it gets up to about 1,000 particulate matter, 2.5 particles. And then here's the Yamaha 220 Bayou. That's the graph for that one, kind of consistent there. Here's the 2006 Chevrolet Suburban, and that one got really high with air pollution. And then here's the 59 Willys Jeep CJ5, and then the graph just kind of went up on it. Then here's an overall total of all of our measurements. You see the green on the graph is the 2006 Chevrolet Suburban. That one had a lot more air pollution than the other cars. Other cars, there are spikes in there you can see. They did jump up a little bit. And then this is our wind monitor. We had that on just sitting kind of on a car tire behind the vehicles, just gathering information just by the exhaust. And then some analysis of the data is two factors that were being measured was the engine size, and we found out the vehicle with the largest engine, which is this Chevrolet Suburban, measured the highest for the particulate matter. And then the vehicle age, it didn't play as much of a big role. The oldest vehicle, the 59 Willys Jeep CJ5, the highest measurement for that one was 689 PM 2.5, while the newest vehicle, the 2008 Honda Pilot, had a measurement of 347 PM 2.5. But the one that was the highest was the Chevrolet Suburban, just because it had the biggest engine. And then this is engine volume compared to all its air pollution. So you see the biggest car engine had the biggest pollution. And then after all the data and results were collected and organized, we concluded that the biggest factor of air pollution from cars and the engine size, the Chevrolet Suburban had by far the most pollution reaching 6,341 PM 2.5. The age and the country that the car is manufactured in do not have much of an effect. Then we suggest that in order to help reduce PM 2.5 levels, you should drive a smaller car if you just need to get around town. There's a place for larger engine vehicles, but we should take care to use to protect the earth and help prevent pollution as much as possible. And then that's our references. Any questions? Yes?
So you were probably limited by the cars you had on hand to test, but what do you think would happen if you had engines of similar size but different ages? Like the bigger engine was a 2006. What if it was an older engine of the same size? Do you think you would see similar results, or would age be a factor?
I think in that case you'd see age as a factor. The older vehicles would probably be producing more because at that point air pollution was not counted like as an effect as much as it is now. Like today we put a lot of money into creating like safer exhaust systems. Yeah, back there.
Do you believe an older vehicle in mint condition would produce more or the same amount of emissions as the same vehicle in used condition?
I think it's all about the same. I don't think the condition of the car would affect it as much.
Nice job.
Back there? Sorry, got one more. Sorry.
One more.
One more. I think all these cars were in very comparable condition. They all seemed about the same. They're all running good, and so yeah.
Hello, everyone. Man, we are all really just holding out for that Jimmy Jones, aren't we? Always. Anyways, my name is Connor Sheff. This is my associate, Professor Titus Hartley. And the title of our presentation here is What is Actually Hurting Our Atmosphere? And that is specific to at the airport. Okay. So, after doing some research on our topic, we found that most air pollution at an airport comes from the gasoline and diesel fuel-powered machines. Duh. These included the machines for like the electricity, heating, and auxiliary power that go to the aircrafts.
For this project, we are measuring the difference in the air pollution at the airport. We are doing this by tracking 3 different things. We did one of them being just like outside the hangar, like with like nothing out there. It was just the parking lot. And then we pulled the plane out and we fired our plane up, which was a Pilatus PC 1245. And we let that run for a couple minutes while measuring and like kind of changing our angles, trying to get like the highest measurement we could from the reading. And then our third thing was the tug that pulled the airplane out.
Okay, so a few of our research questions were, what is the cause of the air pollution at an airport? Just how polluted is the air at an airport? And what can be done to prevent this? Our hypothesis was, if we measure the air quality behind the airplane or tug while they are operating, then the air quality will be significantly more hazardous than in the empty parking lot of the same airport.
So we made sure to use extreme safety during this experiment because safety is everything. And so first off, we started obviously by doing the parking lot, and then pulled the airplane out of the parking lot, and then we had like our safety glasses and like earplugs and stuff like that to remain safe. And then we started it up. We measured it, like I said, for 2-minute increments, and we were like changing our angle, like trying to get like the most exhaust that we could from the plane. And then the tug was pretty straightforward. I mean, you just drop that sucker down there and let it go.
Yeah, and you might have noticed that our picture, it's kind of garbage, but we took it on our phones because we went out and did this experiment on our own. We're just a couple pretty hands-on guys, you know. All right, so our data, little bit of a mess up here. That is actually PM 2.5. This last part was a little bit of a rush, but hey, we all make mistakes. Like, who in here is a Grizz fan, huh? Okay, maybe not the right place to make that joke. Anyways, so you could see, like, we were actually pretty surprised. The airplane, not much more hazardous in the parking lot, coming in at 2.5 PM, whatever. And then the tug was like extremely hazardous when we stuck it down behind the exhaust.
Yeah, so on the AQI scale, the parking lot was like just chilling, like 99, 100. It was actually pretty good. And then we pulled the plane out, and the worst reading that we got with the plane exhaust was 98, which is still like, it's pretty much just the same as the parking lot. But yeah, as soon as we dropped it behind the tug and started firing her up, it just dropped down to 0, and it just stayed there for the full 2 minutes. Which, fun fact about the tugs is that they use like the same fuel as the jets do, even though they're like a lot smaller engine. And so that's why it's a lot worse than the airplane is.
Okay, conclusion. Our hypothesis was not fully supported in this experiment, seeing how that the airplane was surprisingly extremely clean, but the tug was obviously way worse. Sources of errors, we should have used multiple positions when measuring the exhaust of the plane, but you know, you can try and take that device and stand behind a running plane and let me know how it feels. All right? It's like standing in a sandblaster. The plane also forces so much air back at you to the device compared to exhaust, even though we were trying to stand in the slipstream is what they call it. But what we got was the best we could do, again, because it was a little painful. Better equipment would have helped us a lot, considering if we had better equipment, we probably would have been able to get a better reading of the exhaust directly.
So our solution would be, the solution to the air pollution at airports is we should have electrical powered pushback machines, which is the tug. The good news is electrical tugs are already being manufactured and distributed in the airports. Electrical tugs also provide instant power and torque that is unmatched to a fuel-powered tug. An airplane is a much more difficult task to convert to electric, so like, yeah, I don't know how we'd really do that, but obviously we saw that the airplane like wasn't too bad. It was more the tug that was our problem, and we have electricity for that. So the real solution is limiting the carbon emissions put off at the airports as time as new technological advancements are introduced each day and every day.
Yeah, so smaller electric planes, I mean, have been made and developed, but it's just like the commercial planes, which obviously produce more carbon emissions and stuff, which would be the difficult part. This is our reference slide. Again, that was actually a fire picture, but now it just looks like garbage up there. So it's kind of disappointing, you know. I was like, took that picture and I was like, wow, that is good. But anyways, any questions? Do we have time for questions? One. All right, one question. Yeah.
So you mentioned how there was a lot of more air getting pushed towards the sensor when you're behind the plane. Do you think that might have skewed your results because it was pushing away more particulate matters with it?
Yeah, for sure. That's why I was in our labs. All right, is that it? Yeah.
So I thought when you said, I think I misheard you, but you keep referring to like the tug being really high, but I thought you said it dropped down to 0.
Okay, yeah, so that was, no, that's okay, because in our graph, we had AQI, but in our graphs and stuff, that was really measured on PM 2.5. And the AQI, that's when it dropped to 0, is when we were measuring it off the wind tracker meter for that. But then once we got the data sent back from that into the PM 2.5, it was low. All right. Thank you.
Hey, hello everybody and good afternoon. I'm assuming it's that. So my name is Brandon Hilder. I am in the chemistry class at Powell County High School. My chemistry teacher is Mrs. Leadis. So I'm doing my slides on the effect of cooking eggs on PM 2.5. This is kind of ironic because I hate eggs, kind of with a passion. They have to be with something for me to like them. So yeah, everything was mixed in with something at one point. One big inspiration for me to do this is when I cook eggs, sometimes I get headaches. So I was wondering maybe this has some sort of effect on that. So this is my question, my hypothesis. So if I cook eggs using different methods like frying and scrambling, which one would produce the most change in PM 2.5 in the air around the kitchen? I was cooking in a small kitchen on a stove with a microwave above with a air ventilation system, but that was not on or running, so it doesn't really matter too much. The different types of eggs that I cooked, I did your traditional scrambled, I did fried with a little bit of vegetable oil, and fried with some bacon grease. So I think that the method that would have the most effect on the air is probably going to be the bacon grease one, just because it's a little bit more than everything else. So here's my material list. I had a frying pan, stove, a few eggs, one for each run, a tiny bit of bacon grease from one piece of bacon, a PM 2.5 tracker, and my phone to collect the data. My experimental design was when I put the frying pan on the stove, I'd add an egg, I'd set up the PM 2.5 tracker. I did 3 different runs, one for each. The tracker was at the same area for each to be as consistent as possible. I would turn on the stove eye onto medium and cook the egg. The time did vary with the chosen method, which I wish I could fix. Now looking forward into it. After the egg was completely cooked, I would turn off the tracker after a few minutes letting run just to kind of resolve the air out a little. This is my data. So up here you can see the normal fried egg is a lot lower than the scrambled egg, which that kind of surprised me because I figured the vegetable oil would have given that a little bit of boost. And you can also see with the bacon grease, I was right. That went really high. When I was measuring this, my tracker was set to collect data every second, which was kind of unfortunate for me because then I had to go through about 3,000. So I averaged out each one into a minute. So as you can see, the bacon grease took a little bit more than 15 minutes. I did not cook an egg for 15 minutes though, because it would have been charcoal. And the highest measurement for the bacon grease ended up being way over 500, which was pretty insane. So this is my analysis chart. This is all of it mixed together to kind of show where everything was. You can see where the scrambled egg kind of took a little bit less than the rest, and that was my fault. These were a little bit more statistics on my experiments. So my minimum for the scrambled eggs was 67 for PM 2.5. The fried eggs and vegetable oil was only 23. And the fried eggs and bacon grease was 2. And you can also see with the method, that's kind of where it went up and where it went down. Also down here, I have the air quality ratings, which is very unhealthy, unhealthy, and hazardous is where the one showed up. So if I were to just stand over the fried one as it was hazardous, I don't know what would have happened, but that might have not been very good. So a few sources of error and conclusions I had. I did not run everything for the same amount of times. I would love to fix that if I did this again. Also, I did not collect enough data. I only did 1 per each run, which if I did this again, I would plan on doing 3 for each type, just so I could get more of an idea. And I was not able to control as many variables as I could. If I could have, I definitely would have liked to, because I live in a house with a few people, so a door would open, something would happen. I live with a dog, so that might have affected some things. So overall, my data did seem to support my hypothesis. However, I cannot know for sure due to the small data that I did collect. So some of the next steps I would take is I'd make sure to have a set time for everything. That would be for the cooking and for the cooling off of the air and all of that. I would like to do several more runs, as I said before, and I would also make sure that the variables surrounding me were all controlled to the best of my possibilities, to my capabilities. These are a few of the sources that I used that inspired me to do this, and thank you. Okay, questions? Okay, back there. It was electric.
So I have kind of two questions. The first one, did you previously cook the bacon before making the egg?
It was about 10 minutes before.
And my other question is, could that have possibly affected your PM, which is like 5?
It very well could have, and I kind of was, that's why I kind of left the bacon grease hot, because I wanted to see if any of that could affect that with that, if that makes any sense, because, I mean, that affects the overall taste, because, you know, gotta love bacon. And I figured that would do something with the air as well, so that's kind of what I was going for with that as well. Yes.
Did you clean the frying pan between each?
So each one of these was actually a different day in the morning, because I wake up at like 6 a.m. every day, so I did this about 6:20 every day for 3 days in a row. And yes, the frying pan was cleaned, yeah. It was a non-stick frying pan, yeah. Was that your question? Oh, okay.
So on your graphs, I noticed that there were some spikes in the data. Do you think that could have been like when you first put the egg on, or do you think that's because of some outside factor?
Yeah, honestly, I do think it could have been that. I mean, I won't know for sure just because of the lack of runs that I did, but I would figure that, especially on the scrambled eggs. Here, let me go back real quick. The scrambled eggs, they weren't, I think the PM 2.5 tracker decided to turn on while the egg was cooking, so that's kind of why that was in the middle that whole time. So I feel like when the egg started cooking did have an effect on the spike, and also the air kind of might have ran out from a door opening because it was the morning, people were moving, so yeah. Okay, any more? Okay.
I'm McKenna Patrick, and we are from Anaconda Junior Senior High School. And I'm Larkin Galley, and we did our presentation on PM 2.5 levels when welding. So just a little background on what PM 2.5 is. It's an air pollutant that is a concern for people's health when levels in the air are high. PM 2.5 are tiny particles in the air that reduce visibility and cause air to appear hazy or when the levels are elevated. PM 2.5 refers to a category of particulate pollutant that is 2.5 microns or smaller in size.
So our question was, what creates more PM 2.5 when stick, MIG, and gas welding?
And our hypothesis is that the PM 2.5 levels will vary between the 3 different types of welds, but all show high levels of PM 2.5 due to the different fumes released when welding.
So stick welding is a type of metal arc welding, and when stick welding, a metal flux-coated rod is used to lay the weld. And then MIG welding, it's also an arc welding process, and it's where a solid wire electrode is fed through a welding gun to form the weld. And gas welding is when acetylene and gas is used to control the torch flame along with a rod to lay the weld. And then, so for the healthy levels of PM, it's 0 to 12, and then anything over 250 is considered hazardous. And then that's a picture of stick welding, gas welding, and MIG welding.
Some of the materials we used was the wind tracker, a link device being a phone, a combination welder, MIG welder, torch, gas, and acetylene, metal plates, and a rod for both gas and stick welding.
So for the controls, we did 5 minutes of welding for each test. Each separate test was 45 minutes long. We didn't use any fans. No other welds were going on at the same time in the shop. There was one welder for each test, and we used the same metal for each different type of weld. We used a 70-18 rod for stick welding. A PM 2.5 tracker was placed in the same spot for each different weld. And we used the same PM 2.5 tracker. And the dependent variable was the PM 2.5. And the independent variable was the 3 different types of welds that we did.
So for our method, we conducted 2 different 45-minute tests for each of the welds, collecting data on how much PM 2.5 was released. So once preparing to weld, we set a timer for 5 minutes. The welder then began to weld for 5 minutes straight. After the time was up, we waited another 40 minutes with no welding taking place to see if the levels would change as time went on. So after a total of 45 minutes, we collected the data, then proceeded with the next test. And in between each test, we opened the garage door in the shop to try to clear out any remains of PM that we could. Once the PM levels settled around the same as the beginning of the experiment, we closed the door and continued by repeating the same process for each test. Okay, so here are our results. So for stick welding, we found it to be an average of 310, and the highest was at 448, and that's considered hazardous on the PM 2.5 scale. MIG welding, we found an average of 87, and the highest being 128, and that's considered unhealthy. And then for gas welding, we found an average of 141 and a high of 167. And that's considered unhealthy, but the higher levels can be considered very unhealthy.
Okay, so in conclusion, our data was supported by our hypothesis, or our hypothesis was supported by our data, and stick welding had the highest levels, gas had the second highest, and MIG had the lowest levels, but they all showed really high levels of PM 2.5. So for reflection, potential sources of error may include different airflow patterns that the PM tracker might have read, and not being able to make the welding room have the exact same PM 2.5 levels at the beginning of each test. The temperature also in the room may have not stayed consistent through all the tests. And one way we'd like to build upon our experiment is to run more tests for each weld and weld for a longer period of time. Okay, and these are our resources. Do we have any questions?
Yes?
So with your results, do you have any concerns for like the health and the welding?
Yeah, so the results definitely showed unhealthy levels, but one thing that we didn't do is we didn't turn the fan on. And in the welding building, there's about, I think like 9 booths, and each one has its own ventilation system. So when the welding classes are all in there, they're all required to have that ventilation system on, so that helps with the levels.
Yeah.
Was it all on the same metal piece, or was it different metal pieces that were welded on?
So with welding, we did the same metal piece for each of the tests. So stick welding had the same MIG and gas, but with the welds, they're all required to have a different type of metal. So we could stay consistent for each test, but we ended up with 3 different metals.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Hiltonen.
I'm Katie Lilibet.
We are freshmen from Capitol High School, and our biology teacher is Mrs. Urban.
For our REACH project today, we chose to test the levels of particulate matter, or PM 2.5, in the vanilla bean bakery and cafe.
Our experimental design. Our research question was, how do the levels of PM 2.5 differ in the center of the kitchen and the center of the dining area? We hypothesized that if we tested the levels of PM 2.5 in the vanilla bean bakery then the kitchen would have a higher PM 2.5 level than the dining area because of many fine particles in the air, such as flour and sugar, that are required in the baking process.
We chose this project because the Vanilla Bean Bakery is a place that we visit often, and high levels of PM 2.5 can affect your health and breathing. So we wanted to make sure that this bakery had a safe air quality. We were also interested in seeing the PM 2.5 levels of this business because it contains many fine particles that are commonly in the air due to the baking process throughout the workday, such as flour and sugar.
PM 2.5 is particulate matter with a diameter of 2.5 microns or less. Although PM 2.5 will never be 100% safe, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's National Ambient Air Quality Standards state that a person who breathes around 12 micrograms per cubic meter of air have a low risk of developing health problems that these particles can cause. Part of the PM 2.5 inhaled cannot be removed by the lymphatic system and enters the blood circulation via diffusion. Then, the inhaled PM 2.5 goes into the heart, kidneys, and other organs. PM 2.5 can have a range of effects such as eye, nose, throat, or lung irritation. Other effects can be much more serious, such as asthma, chronic lung problems, and heart disease.
Some of the materials we used, we didn't really require many. We needed 2 dialysis machines provided by our teacher and the Vanilla Bean Bakery dining room and kitchen. So once the bakery opened, we began collecting data, and each trial ran for at least 24 hours, but in this case we ran it for a total of 3 days straight. The independent variable of was the location in the bakery. The dependent variable was the amount of PM 2.5 in the air. To keep our experiment as consistent as possible, we placed the dialysis machines in the same location each time we recorded data, and our control group was the bakery during closed hours. This was to establish an accurate baseline for the air quality in the bakery with no disruptions from people or machines running.
Our data collection. This graph shows the PM 2.5 levels in micrograms per meter cubed over a 3-day period. The blue line represents the kitchen, while the orange represents the dining area. Looking at the large orange spike at around 5 o'clock a.m. is the first part of activity for this day. During this hour is when the morning baker begins to work. This infers that when there is more movement in the kitchen, the PM 2.5 level will rise and spike.
We can also see this 5 a.m. spike during the 3rd day of our data collection. This is once again when the morning baker comes in and starts working. Another place we see a large spike is during the breakfast and lunch hours from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. With this, the level of PM 2.5 increases with the movement and airflow from people and materials.
Our box and whisker plot displays the average levels of PM 2.5 in the kitchen in blue and in the dining areas in orange. In this plot, we took the averages of the PM 2.5 levels during the work hours, 5 a.m. through 5 p.m., of the days shown in the graph from the previous slides to get a better understanding of the averages throughout the day. For our summary in the dining room, from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., it peaked at 35 micrograms per cubic meter of air, and then went down to 27, and 15 was the lowest. And for the kitchen, the peak was at 32, then went down to 24, and then 15.
Our tests so far in the experiment we ran did not support our original hypothesis. Our trial showed that the dining area had a higher level of PM 2.5 than the kitchen, but there was only a slight difference of 3 micrograms per cubic meter of air difference between the dining room and kitchen area. During closed hours, the PM 2.5 levels in both locations dropped significantly to about 1.6 micrograms per cubic meter of air, and the highest level of PM 2.5 in the kitchen could be seen at 9:40 a.m. on March 21st, and the highest level of PM 2.5 in the dining area occurred at 5:06 a.m. on March 22nd. and each day the trends in the data were similar.
Improvements and errors. We ran many trials and decided that collecting data for 3 days instead of 1 would give us more concise results. However, this did not allow us to know how the PM2.5 levels may vary throughout the year. If we were to run this experiment again, we would do trials for multiple days throughout the seasons. Unfortunately, one error was when our Dialos machines were occasionally disconnected by the employees. Additionally, we had a malfunction with our machines that led to the Dialos not recording the level of PM2.5, but instead the particle count. We did not use this data.
We were also unable to observe the bakery during our testing, so we couldn't see what caused the spikes, which was another source of error. If we were to run this experiment again, there are many variables that would change. For instance, during the summer, the garage door is open to let in some fresh air and sunshine to the customers, and it would be interesting to collect this data and see how it would compare during these months where the garage door is closed. Some other variables we could change were the time or the day and the location in the bakery where we placed the Dialos machines.
We believe that the level of PM2.5 in the Vanilla Bean Bakery was higher in the dining room because of customers using items that were near the Dialos machines and many people walking throughout the room. Workers are also seen in the dining area, so this was also a factor in the extra movement creating the spikes in the data.
After thinking about why and how our hypothesis was unsupported, we concluded that it would make sense that the dining area would have a higher PM2.5 level because of all the people and coming in and out and the doors opening. It was an eye-opener to see that because when we began we thought that this couldn't be true, but our idea is that flour and sugar, because of our idea that flour and sugar would cause more peaks in the data. But some other possibilities for the spikes in the dining room could have been from cleaning products or a higher population of people than are in the kitchen. And these are our references.
We have time for one question.
That's an awkward silence. There's one right there.
How did the bakery feel about having their air quality tested?
The bakery is actually owned by Caitlin's mom, so she was was okay with us trying it, and she
supported us. She helped me out, and the bakery has a very good air filtration system. The spikes that we do see in our data are recorded in the minutes. So if there is a spike in the data, it's only for about a minute and then immediately drops back down. So it has a good air filtration system.
So I'd like to formally thank these two guys for waiting so patiently towards the very end. This is the last presentation.
All right, so our experiment was the effect of ventilation in classrooms against classrooms without ventilation and the effect it can have on our youth. And I'm Gavin. He's Gavin. I'm Shane. We're from Corvallis High School. I'm a teacher with Mr. Hamill in the chemistry program.
So
All right, what is carbon dioxide? It is a tasteless, odorless, and colorless gas that is heavier than air and has a tendency to sink down to lower areas, and that can displace oxygen, leading to deficiencies, which can cause all type of symptoms. Now, the purpose of this whole experiment was to measure carbon dioxide in classrooms, and put them against classrooms without it. our definition of ventilation was open windows, air filters, fans, and open doors. Now the question we asked was, is it safe or not, and does it affect the development in children and teenagers? And from our hypothesis, from observation, we have found that if there is ventilation present in a classroom, then the levels of CO2 in parts per million will be lower than classrooms with no ventilation.
So there have been similar studies done on the effect of CO2 in classrooms, such as the effect of CO2 concentration on child's well-being during the process of learning. It was published November 21st, 2020, and it says the effects of CO2 concentration on a child's well-being during the process of learning is proven that IAQ, standing for indoor air quality, has a direct effect on the working capacity of the students, thus impacts the academic performance. So the CO2 concentration is also an indicator of air stagnation, which is where the air just stays where it is, and COVID particles can stay in the air longer, which is relevant at the time now with COVID-19. And another part of relevance is that CO2 in the classrooms affects children's learning because children are the future of our society, so we should probably be worried about it. And
all right, the effects of carbon dioxide and why it is harmful. So high concentrations can replace oxygen in the air, and if there's less oxygen available to breathe, symptoms such as rapid breathing, excess heart rate, clumsiness, upsets emotionally, and fatigue are some of the different symptoms. And as less oxygen becomes available, different things such as nausea, vomiting, convulsions, or in serious cases, death can occur. Now, when breathing in air with high carbon dioxide levels, CO2 levels in our bodies rise, which can restrict the amount of oxygen coming to our brains, which can lead to tiredness, anxiety, cuts on decisive decision making, and decreases in productivity.
so the materials we used for our experiment were the wind halo air sensing monitoring system, a stopwatch to see how long the experiment would go, Google Sheets to put our data into, and then me and Shane were the people who recorded the data. The first step was to turn on the wind halo sensor and wait 5 minutes for the CO2 to calibrate and read. Second step was to inspect the classrooms for presences of ventilation. Third step was to find the center of the classroom, which is where we recorded our data. The fourth step was to have one person watch the air sensor and record. The other person records, and our sixth step was to compile the data into Google Sheets. So this is our first graph, and it shows the averages of the non-ventilated classrooms versus the ventilated classrooms. And the red is ventilated versus blue being non-ventilated, and you can see that there is a difference for most every classroom. And this is a box and whisker plot of both classrooms. You can see the minimums, first quartiles, the median, the third quartile, and the max for both ventilated and non-ventilated. And both of them are spread out pretty well.
And this graph is a line graph. It shows the difference in the two data groups over time, and there's a definite disparity between the two.
So our data analysis, CO2 levels in non-ventilated classrooms was significantly higher because there was less movement of air. And so we did a p-test, and a p-test is it tests the statistical similarity of data, and it came out with a 0.001 for the value, which means that the data sets were not statistically similar. So it shows us that the data is not, it's conclusive that there is a difference between our data. And
all right, so some of the errors we went through was the time period. Since it was a school day, we had a limited time to do it. During, the time we did it was 12:30 to 2 o'clock. which was when everybody was coming back from lunch. And we had a close proximity to the sensor in order for us to read it. We did cover our mouths with masks in this process just to help us not spread our CO2 and help pick that up. Time into the class, once again, coming back from lunch, some people might have more carbon dioxide exhales. And there was an inconsistent number of students per room. Since this was during the school day, we were not privileged to have the same number of students in the same room, which may have led to a more accurate graph. Now, in conclusion, our hypothesis was correct in proving that ventilation, if any, helped at all keep carbon dioxide levels down inside of a room. And there are studies that show that CO2 effects can affect cognitive abilities. And here are our references.
Any questions? Anybody have questions? Yes.
Did you guys take the average size of all the classrooms?
We did not take the average size of the classrooms, but I'm pretty sure they're similar.
It was quite a bit of, it was a lot of different classrooms. Were they all roughly the same size? I know there was one that said weight rooms.
Yeah, the weight room and the shop were a little bit bigger than the rest, but most of the normal classrooms were all the same size.
Because I would imagine CO2 would disperse differently in a smaller space versus a larger space. So
Yes.
that could be interesting.
Okay, great. Other questions?
Okay, so that's it for the talks. So real fast, I have some important information. So we are about to break for lunch. Anna's going to talk about what the lunch procedures are. Before we break for lunch, I think we're all excited about Jimmy John's, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So I'd like to formally thank Bonnie Rouse with Montana DEQ. So because of Bonnie, we can have Jimmy John's. So thank you, Bonnie. So once we break for lunch, be sure and check out the health fair, right? Because I got free stuff to give away. So now we're going to give away some prizes. And thank you very much, everybody, for the effort that you did put into your presentations and your research projects, and hopefully learned a little something about doing research. It's not an easy thing to do, but oftentimes nothing works when you do research, and I think you got a kind of a good feel for that. And I loved how you were talking about well, maybe I should have done this, this, or this, or maybe as a solution to showing that there's high levels of particulates that we're exposed to, that maybe we should do this. So I think that's a really good exercise to go through and to think about ways that we could all breathe healthier air. So at this point, we are going to recognize some of our judges, and I think Carolyn is going to recognize our poster judges.
Hi there. Judging posters this year was a big deal. We had 67 posters. Usually we have 40 at the most. Oh, thank you. So we had, besides myself, we had 4 poster judges. Let's see here. Emily Weiler, Deshane Barnett, come on up. Cami Kirschberg and Sienna Westcar Gray. So those are the 4 judges this year. There you go. The rest could not be here. Emily helped this morning, but she had a meeting or something. So thank you so much.
Now, you may have recognized Dr. Barnett. He's actually the director of the Missoula City County Health Department. So thank you to Shane. So now I think we're going to recognize our presentation judges.
That is I. Except for student. We have 4 judges. Do I need to read that? We have from the University of Montana, number Ethan Walker, School of Public and Community Health Sciences. Mary French, College of Health.
Sure.
Sure. Sarah Schofield from the City County Health Department, and Dr. Lulu from the Department of Chemistry here at the University of Montana. So we have
Okay, next we're gonna recognize your teachers, and if you guys would hoop and holler and be real proud of your teachers that took the, not yet, when I say their name. Your teachers really helped provide you the opportunity to participate, to come here to the University of Montana, to spend your time with us. We are sure grateful for them, and I know that you are as well. So again, if you would just holler when your teacher's name is called, and when I say your name, teachers, if you'd come on down so we can give you a thank you as well. So in no particular order, Patricia Leeds. Andrea Panagakis. Bill Becker. Renee Rose. Jared Forsyth. Noel Gleiba. Kate Mattern. Unfortunately not here today, right? But we've got a teacher in her place. So Aubrey, if you come on up for her, please. Thank you so much. Dean Placco. Sarah Urban. Bob Ellenbecker. Brian Ferreter. Greg Messerman. And Brock Hamill.
and Mary Webb.
It wasn't a forget, it was, and Mary Webb!
They took so many pictures, like facing my way. Like epic, like 3 each one. Like you're in the background. I actually don't want to be in my house. I'll be behind the video. Look pleasant. Well, usually they put everybody that way. It's funny how they're around I do have just like really bad excessive pictures. And so, yeah, I would practice being looking bloody.
You guys ready for the awards? Okay, first off, we're going to give away awards for second, third, and first, I can't even count, first, second, and third place for the posters. And I believe Carolyn Hester is going to make those announcements.
Right, I'll grab that microphone. All right, for the third place poster, the title is Testing Radon in Schools, Gabe Gale and Tanner Cromwell from Anaconda. go. So please go for bike. All right, second place. The title is Wax Melts and PM 2.5, Jordan McRae from Capitol High School. All right, and the first place winners, the title is PM 2.5 Particles Produced by Cooking Eggs in 3 Types of Oil. James Nordenstrom, Nate Davis, and Fox Goodrich from Corvallis.
Just smile. It just always smiles. Yeah.
Okay. Prizes for the top 3 presentations. In third, coming out of Corvallis, we have Gavin Morrison. All right, second place from Valley Christian, we had Zach, Z, L, and that's it.
We must go by Z now.
Z forever.
Zach is that. All right, come on over here.
All right. Time for the first place prize. Should we dim the lights? Yeah. Should we have a drum roll? Coming out of Corvallis, Corey Davidson, and Elsa Miller.
Okay, well that is it. Thanks for coming today. Like I said, we haven't done this in a couple of years, bringing people together. And it's been a real wonderful experience seeing everybody in person. Thanks to everybody. Good luck with the end of the semester madness, and best of luck to you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.